Listen, man, I just want to start over and get my life, on the right track.
An accused Merrill Street hood gang leader is out of prison after serving 12 years and says he wants to get his life on track. Bobby Younger's attorney believes the trial and conviction was based on perjured testimony from rival gang members.
Causing death and dogfighting, just two of 26-year-old Samuel Wood's 28 charges. His arrest warrant by far the longest. Daryl Morgan and DeAndre Chambers' charges add up to, they tie at 20 apiece. All three men tied to a shooting at a fast food restaurant in Flint in 2004. Charges in 7 drug-related homicides dating back to that same year are split among them and about 10 others in this stack.
A Flint-area gang member will spend nearly 3 years in a federal penitentiary after he violated probation for illegal gun charges. Flint Township police say they encountered Tyrone Carson passed out behind the wheel of a vehicle on Corona Road in March of 2023.
Major bust in mid-Michigan turns up weapons, cash, and drugs.
Flint, Michigan is a city of extremes, the birthplace of boxing champion Claressa Shields, NBA star Glenn Rice, actor Terry Crews, rap pioneer MC Breed, and the historic GM sit-down strike that helped shape America's labor movement, yet also a place where economic collapse, disinvestment, and street politics created fertile ground for gangs, drug networks, and retaliatory violence. Behind the stories of champions and cultural legends is another Flint most outsiders never see. Southside turf known as Murda Ville. Bloody rivalries like Nick Mafia versus Tay Mafia. Brutal internal gang deletions. Teen victims trapped in gang culture. And cases so serious they brought FBI task forces, RICO charges, and major federal crackdowns to the city. This video pulls back the curtain on that underworld, the gangs, the indictments, and the cases that forever changed how law enforcement and the streets move in Flint.
What we do have, though, is a page-by-page account of what investigators say the Pierson hood gang is responsible for. One man charged 28 times. Terrorism causing death and dogfighting, just two of 26-year-old Samuel Wood's 28 charges. His arrest warrant by far the longest. Daryl Morgan and DeAndre Chambers' charges add up to, they tie at 20 apiece. All three men tied to a shooting at a fast food restaurant in Flint in 2004. Charges in 7 drug-related homicides dating back to that same year are split among them and about 10 others in this stack. Terrorizing people across Genesee County for years, investigators say. A dangerous gang dismantled.
One of the most violent criminal organizations operating in the city of Flint.
On December 17, 2007, officials in Genesee County announced what they described as a major takedown of a violent group known as the Pierson Hood Gang. In the initial wave, 21 people were arrested, and authorities said the suspects faced a wide range of allegations, including deletion, terrorism, armed robbery, dogfighting, fraud, and weapons charges, following an investigation officials said took about a year. At the time of the announcement, officials also said they expected more arrests and were searching for roughly a dozen additional suspects, while publicly linking the investigation to earlier high-profile incidents such as the 2004 Super 8 motel double homicide and a 2005 shooting outside Club Exclusive. After the arrests, the case didn't move forward as one single trial is spread into multiple prosecutions tied to different incidents, with some taking years to reach the courtroom. By January 2011, reporting described what was being framed as the first deletion trial connected to the broader Pierson Hood investigation, more than 3 years after the crackdown became public. That coverage showed the tension that often happens in big enterprise cases. Prosecutors leaned heavily on witness testimony to connect people and events, while defense teams attacked credibility and argued the evidence didn't conclusively prove who did what. One of the most serious threads prosecutors tied into the same umbrella investigation involved a deadly 2005 fire at the Westwood Manor Apartments. Investigators alleged the fire was intentionally set during a gang conflict and was meant to draw out a rival, but it instead resulted in the deaths of Kokona Vaughn and her daughter Ziona Burris. Court coverage described testimony from a Flint police sergeant connected to a joint task force and framed the case as part of a wider set of violent incidents prosecutors associated with the Pierson Hood group.
It's a blessing, man. I just want to start over and get my life, on the right track.
An accused Merrill Street hood gang leader is out of prison after serving 12 years and says he wants to get his life on track. Bobby Younger's attorney believes the trial and conviction was based on perjured testimony from rival gang members. Back in 2006, a jury convicted Younger of assault with intent to murder, armed robbery, and felony firearm. Violent crime involving the Merrill Street hood gang and the Pierson hood gang skyrocketed in the early 2000s, including a double homicide at this Super 8 motel. In a separate incident, investigators believe Younger shot and severely wounded Pierson hood gang member Garner Wood and his mom in 2004. Nearby, another Pierson hood member was shot. The two Pierson hood gang members testified against Younger, denying any past run-ins with him and denying they were ever part of the Pierson hood gang and denied its existence.
Well, he's actually saying this whole conviction, Stephanie, is entirely flawed. Attorney David Myott says after investigating for 4 years, he found documents showing Wood had sworn under oath in 2007 that he was in fact a member of the Pierson hood gang. Then added he did have an angry run-in with Younger hours before Younger allegedly shot him in 2004. Wood also confirming the Pierson hood gang did indeed exist. Myott wrote to the Genesee County prosecutor's office in January, telling them about his discovery. That's when the office investigated and agreed the testimony was indeed perjured, then also agreed to allow Younger out after just 12 years of time served. Prosecutor David Layton says 12 years is an acceptable sentence length for crimes Younger was convicted of, insisting his office did not put 2 and 2 together in regards to that perjured testimony until Myott contacted them earlier this year.
The case of Bobby Younger is one of Genesee County's most controversial gang convictions. Once labeled an alleged leader of Flint's Merrill Street hood gang, Younger was convicted in 2006 of shooting Pierson hood member Garner Wood and Wood's mother in 2004. At trial, Wood and fellow Pierson hood member Montaliper denied being in a gang, denied any rivalry, and claimed there was no prior confrontation with Younger. Their testimony helped secure convictions for assault with intent to delete, armed robbery, felony firearm, and felon in possession, and Younger was sentenced to 32 to 50 years in prison. Years later, Younger's appellate attorney, David Myott, uncovered sworn statements from 2007-2008 in which Wood admitted he was a Pierson hood member, that Younger was Merrill Hood, and that the two had argued just hours before the shooting. In other words, the key witnesses had lied under oath about their gang ties and history with Younger. When this was brought to prosecutor David Layton, he conceded the conviction was clearly flawed. Rather than retry a weakened, years-old case built on tainted testimony, prosecutors agreed to a time-served deal, and Younger was released after about 12 years behind bars.
At 6 o'clock, a Flint-area gang member will spend nearly 3 years in a federal penitentiary after he violated probation for illegal gun charges. Flint Township police say they encountered Tyrone Carson passed out behind the wheel of a vehicle on Corunna Road in March of 2023. Police say he rammed their patrol cars and attempted to flee, but officers broke windows on his vehicle to gain access inside and subdue Carson. They found a loaded Glock handgun with a switch on his lap designed to turn it into a fully automatic weapon. Authorities say Carson has a criminal history of illegal firearm possession, and he is suspected in several shootings and fraud cases.
Police and federal agents say the case of Tyrone Carson shows just how dangerous the feud between two local gangs has become. In March 2023, officers found Carson passed out behind the wheel of a vehicle stopped near Corunna Road at I-75. When they tried to wake him and make contact, Carson suddenly hit the gas, ramming police vehicles and attempting to flee. Officers smashed the car windows, pulled him out, and took him into custody. Inside the vehicle, they found a loaded Glock handgun that had been illegally modified with a switch, a tiny device that converts a standard pistol into a fully automatic weapon under federal law, legally treated the same as a machine gun. Carson was already on probation and had 2 prior firearm convictions, meaning he was prohibited from possessing any gun, let alone a converted automatic. Investigators also identified him as a member of Mafia, a Flint-area gang locked in a violent rivalry with Tay Mafia. According to Flint Township Police, that feud has driven a wave of retaliatory shootings across Genesee County, including more than 150 shootings into occupied homes and at least 25 deletions, many of them involving bystanders who had nothing to do with the conflict. Detectives believe Carson wasn't just a member standing on the sidelines. They described him as an alleged shooter for Mafia, who even appeared in rap videos bragging about gun violence and his role in the gang. Federal prosecutors charged Carson with being a felon in possession of a machine gun classified firearm, based on the Glock and its conversion device. A U.S. District Court judge ultimately sentenced Carson to 33 months in federal prison, followed by supervision after release.
Yes, that's right, Elisa and Meg. The Genesee County Sheriff's Office says the investigation began 2 months ago. They zeroed in on 4 homes this week after using surveillance and controlled buys to build their case. The team effort helped to take down a drug trafficking organization. Sheriff Swanson says the suspects who sold the drugs laundered money by buying designer shoes and selling them.
Genesee County's Ghost Unit opened this case after a local overdose led investigators to suspect a high-purity meth pipeline feeding the Flint and Mount Morris area. As they followed the trail, the same names kept surfacing: Michael Fraley Jr. of Flint and Timothy Dyer of Mount Morris. Detectives say the two were acting as commanders in a drug gang known as the Cobras, overseeing meth distribution while lower-level members handled street sales. A key player identified in the operation was Alexandria Dodge, described as a trusted drug mule responsible for transporting meth between suppliers, stash locations, and dealers. On April 28th, after about 4 months of investigative work, officers launched coordinated raids and arrested Fraley, Dyer, and Dodge, seizing nearly half a pound of meth, a significant amount for a single local crew. All 3 were turned over to federal authorities. Fraley was indicted on 2 counts of possession with intent to distribute meth, each carrying a 5-year mandatory minimum. Dyer was charged with 3 counts of meth distribution and possession, and Dodge was hit with 2 counts of possessing more than 50 grams of meth with intent to distribute. At the time of the public reporting, final plea deals or sentences for Dyer and Dodge hadn't been detailed, but investigators said the case showed how gangs like the Cobras operate less like individual dealers and more like small trafficking cells, with leadership at the top, mules and runners in the middle, and local users at the bottom paying the price. The case of the insane Spanish Cobras case in Genesee County became one of Flint's most disturbing gang prosecutions because of how a vulnerable teenager was targeted. In 2014, a 13-year-old runaway met several members of the insane Spanish Cobras at a party on Flint's east side. They lured her to a house on Franklin Street, a known Cobra hangout where, over 2 days, she was raped, threatened, and forced through a gang initiation that prosecutors said was designed to recruit and trap her inside the set. Investigators later described the incident as a calculated gang ritual, not a random assault. 4 men were ultimately charged: 23-year-old Terry Taylor, 27-year-old Stephen Washburn, 20-year-old Jacob Earls, and 19-year-old Anthony Bunn. The original case stacked more than 40 felonies on the group, including gang membership, gang recruitment, unlawful imprisonment, and multiple criminal sexual conduct counts. During a 5-hour preliminary hearing, the victim gave powerful testimony about the threats, gang symbolism, and coordinated role each man played. The experience was so traumatizing that she later moved out of state and told prosecutors she could not face testifying again, but her sworn testimony was preserved and used in court. Facing that evidence, Taylor and Washburn pleaded guilty to second-degree criminal sexual conduct and felony gang participation, each facing potential multi-decade sentences. Bunn took an earlier plea deal that required him to testify truthfully about the Cobra's structure and the Franklin Street events, while Earls moved forward toward his own hearing on similar charges. Genesee County's Ghost Unit. When Craig C.J. Myott was reported missing in May 2020, His family had no idea he had already met his demise. Over the next year, investigators uncovered that the 25-year-old, affiliated with a local Flint-area street gang, had been targeted in an internal gang dispute. Prosecutor David Layton said fellow members believed CJ had broken gang rules and put a green light on him, essentially authorizing his own associates to take him out. 4 suspects were eventually identified and charged, but for months detectives had almost nothing to work with. No eyewitnesses, minimal physical evidence, and only scattered, anonymous tips. On June 28, 2021, more than 13 months after he vanished, officers finally found Myott's remains under a tarp in a remote wooded area near Clio Road and Stewart Avenue, a location so hidden that police believe it was chosen to ensure the body would never be discovered. Detectives concluded CJ met his demise inside a Flint residence and then dumped in the woods as part of a cover-up. By the time his body was recovered, investigators had already built a strong case showing it was a planned internal gang hit carried out by people he once trusted. In court, all 4 defendants were ultimately held accountable. Prosecutors labeled Cody Rowland the main orchestrator, and he was sentenced to life without parole on open deletion and conspiracy charges. Co-defendants Devin Sales and Madison Merrill were convicted of second-degree deletion and conspiracy, receiving 30-60 years and 25-40 years, while Selena Johnson, who helped facilitate the plot, was also convicted of second-degree deletion and handed a lengthy multi-decade sentence. The takedown of the Howard Boys was one of the most significant gang prosecutions in Flint's history, and the first time federal prosecutors used the RICO Act, a law originally designed to dismantle the mafia against a Flint street gang. For years, the Howard Boys controlled a section of the south side around the Howard Estates complex, an area they called Murda Ville. Prosecutors said the crew ruled through intimidation, shootings, and open-air drug dealing, running the neighborhood like a small criminal enterprise, sharing guns, guarding drug corners, taxing smaller dealers, and enforcing their rules with violence. Police documented a clear pattern of organized behavior: coordinated drug sales, shared weapons, planned retaliatory attacks, and a defined territory advertised through graffiti like MVHB, gang tattoos, hand signs, and coded social media posts. A 41-page federal indictment tied the gang to 3 deletions: Jonathan Parker in 2004, Marion Hardy in 2006, and Malachi Wilson in 2009, at least 7 attempted deletions, and a long list of gun and dope cases that prosecutors said were all part of the same effort to control Murda Ville. The RICO trial in Flint federal court lasted more than a month and pulled in over 20 witnesses, including former Howard Boys, who testified under cooperation deals. Prosecutors said there were repeated attempts to intimidate witnesses and even concerns that jurors were being watched as they left court, forcing extra security. Together, these cases paint a clear picture of a city battling far more than isolated crime. They reveal organized violence, internal betrayals, predatory gang rituals, and entire trafficking pipelines operating inside Genesee County. But they also show the other side of Flint: determined detectives, families who refuse to stay silent, prosecutors pushing through intimidation, and communities fighting to reclaim their blocks. Flint's story is not just about crime, it's about survival, accountability, and a city that refuses to be broken, no matter how dark the challenges become.